Willkommen till Document TV International. We are joined just now by our very own Nanook of the North, Geir the Great. What say you, sir?
I say welcome to you all. Welcome, Charles, to Oslo. I'm sorry I'm not there to show you around, but I'm in the capital of northern Norway, Tromsø. I actually have a Hillary map. Did you take that one? Hillary map behind me, a bit crooked. How are things in Oslo?
Very pleasant. The first time I've ever been here in a summer month. It's a little bit colder than New York City, but a lot better organized, and a real treat to be here.
Well, I hope my fellow countrymen take good care of you. Let's go straight to what we're here for, current affairs. And yesterday morning, you sent me a mail, and we spoke about it too. You said, see the interview Tucker Carlson made with RFK Jr. I started watching it yesterday morning, but I soon realized that I wouldn't have time to see all of it before I had to go live on Document Radio. So I have, until now, I haven't seen the whole interview. But it's definitely a must watch for everyone. And of course, we will provide you with the link. It's a must-see for everyone. Let's see the first clip to go straight to the core here. No, by the way, no. What I found astounding, and I have seen it, but I don't think we have written extensively on it. Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., is, of course, a Democratic presidential candidate, and he's the one challenging the acting president, Democratic, Joe Biden. And his uncle, John F. Kennedy, was killed on November the 22nd in 1963. His father, Robert F. Kennedy, was killed in California. I can't remember the date right now, but it's not that important. So of any presidential candidate in history, he ought to have protection. But he doesn't have protection, does he, Charles?
Yes, I found the interview, and I really would recommend our viewers take as much time as they can to watch. It's almost an hour and 30 minutes long, the whole thing. But he talks extensively about the fact that very recently there was an intruder in his own home who made it to the second floor, a mentally deranged man who was going to try to hurt either RFK or he's got a big family, a member of his family. And he was fortunately stopped. And that's not the only time that an intruder has made it into his personal residence. And unlike many other challengers, for example, Barack Obama, at around the same distance from the looming election in 2008, Barack Obama, with about 5% of the popular vote at that time, got Secret Service protection. And obviously there were many threats against him for various reasons in the US, but he gets it, Herman Cain gets it, many other people got it who did not have as much of a standing in the polls as RFK Jr. now has. And it really seems particularly spiteful, frankly, of this president to be doing simultaneously what he's doing to former President Trump with all these indictments, which certainly have fingerprints, if not more, of Joe Biden and his top people on that process of discrediting Trump, and also to deny protection and to still, at this late stage, refuse to debate somebody who's polling with 20% of the vote now at the very early stages of the campaign, and who has, as you'll see on the interview, a very appealing message, even for people like me who don't like the Kennedys.
I mean, you use the word spiteful. I think I would like to use an even stronger word. In my opinion, it's criminal. I mean, whether you like Robert RFK Jr. or not, but that you cannot have the decency to afford your candidate. It's undemocratic, and isn't there a chance that anyone could intervene and do something about it? I mean, or the acting president has all the powers.
Well, I think the way this is working, and not working for Biden, but working in practice, is pollsters are very active. And the polling on this, as the polling when Biden refused to acknowledge his seventh grandchild, was so negative that his advisors finally convinced Biden that he had to acknowledge the seventh grandchild. Similarly, I think on this issue of not granting Secret Service protection and ultimately of not debating, I think he's going to have to reverse course on both counts. And, because every time Kennedy appears, you get to contrast how he does with how Biden the bumbler does. Yesterday, not even able to remember where the fires were in Hawaii. And I mean, in contrast, you have a man in RFK who's 69 years old and has had many challenges in his life, personal challenges beyond obviously losing his uncle and father. He can put his game together and conduct an interview over an hour without using notes, going very cogently and eloquently through complex topics. And for me, the most telling piece of it was admitting that he was wrong opposing the border wall when Trump wanted it, going down to the border and talking poignantly about what he witnessed, bringing it home for the crowd with very few pictures of actually what Kennedy had seen. He took the trouble to go down there. Kamala wouldn't really do it. Biden hasn't done it. And he told heart-wrenching tales of the damage being done to the people who are risking their lives and enriching the cartels, trying to make it illegally into this country. In the main, these are not people, according to Kennedy, and it makes sense, who are fleeing to the United States for because they're being politically persecuted in their home country. Most of these people are just coming to the U.S. because they want a better life and should go through the legal process. So on many levels, this was a tour de force interview by Kennedy. And it was also interesting for me, having spent time with Tucker in person, to see how Tucker reacted to Kennedy in real time. It's really a gripping piece of television, in my view.
I totally agree. I think some of our viewers may not be aware of the fact that RFK Jr. has a speech impediment, which I think is caused by his disease in his throat. You might know more about that, but that makes it a little bit hard for non-native English speakers to understand everything he says. But his mind is, as you said, extremely sharp. Right. And before we go back to U.S. affairs in general, I have had Don prepared a clip that I think all of you ought to see here and now.
Ukraine war, I mean, we're being lied to about it.
In what way?
Well, I mean, we were lied to from the beginning. We had this comic book depiction that, which we see on every war. There's a bad guy who's like, unspeakably evil.
Yes.
And this is just the start. This is the warm-up. He goes on in detail and explaining. He goes back in history, how Gorbachev struck a deal with James Baker and then President Bush, the older, and promising that the U.S. would not move NATO 1 inch, as Baker said, to the east. Now, as Kennedy says, they broke that promise and they moved NATO troops 1,000 miles to the east. And Ukraine, as Tucker analyzed it correctly, in my opinion, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, Charles, that Ukraine was all about attacking Russia.
Yeah, I mean, Kennedy's analysis is excellent and really worth contemplating and checking for yourselves. You can go and look into the history books. You could read, James Baker has a book, I think he talks about exactly this issue. And Kennedy is absolutely right. He didn't start where I would start, which is to say that it's outrageous that our administration, the U.S. administration and our allies would adopt a posture of saying, as Biden did, that we don't care to understand why Vladimir Putin is upset with what's going on in Ukraine. We don't care about any of the history. We're going to bring this up, start with the Russian incursion or special military operation into Ukraine. That's where we're going to start. We don't care about anything before that. Looking at our own history in America, where did our struggle begin? With the Declaration of Independence. What is that document? It's a recitation of the grievances that Thomas Jefferson and others had in 1776. That's how wars start. That's how great conflicts start. If you're not going to read the Declaration of Independence, how are you going to understand what the United States Revolution was all about? And similarly, if you're not going to go in to the long history, the Minsk Accords, before the Minsk Accords, as you say, the Maidan uprising, and who really instigated that and who paid for it, if you're not going to go all the way back to 1992 and arguably before then, you're never going to be useful as an alliance doing anything regarding Ukraine. And taking a big step back, which Kennedy didn't, should the goal of NATO be to go out of existence because there's no need to protect Europe because we have forged a lasting peace? Or should NATO become a warfighting machine, enriching the military contractors in the U.S. and elsewhere forever, taking on more and more conflicts as these spike and spiral out of control all over the world? I prefer the former. I think it should be the goal of NATO should be to disappear because we've actually forged a peace across the Atlantic. That should be its goal.
I agree. I think because we should have hours of talks on the history. And if you don't know history, as you very well know, Charles, we're bound to commit the same mistakes as our predecessors did. Unfortunately, we don't have the time nor the resources to do a full history lesson here, but I want to go back 9 years. I want to go back to what is still in the mind of many of our viewers, I assume, namely what you mentioned, the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine. Let's hear what RFK Jr. says about this.
2014, there are riots it's called the Maidan Rebellion in Ukraine, which we're not told that we are financing those riots. The newspapers never told us, our government never told us. USAID, which is a CIA front, put $5 billion into funding those riots. Those riots lead to a coup d'etat against the first democratically elected government of the Ukraine. It was a government that refused to choose sides and to say, we're going to be on the side of the West. So we wanted them out. A month before that government is overthrown, Victoria Nuland, who's the part of the centerpiece of the neocon ideology and who is now a high-level official in the State Department, has a secret call with the U.S. ambassador, which is tape recorded and is now public, which anybody can go and look up, where she is picking the new cabinet for the Ukraine, which is a U.S. Western cabinet. So they're picking the new government a month before the old government is overthrown.
Is that how democracy? Is that democracy when Victoria Nuland picks her government?
Well, that's the point. Is USAID doesn't really do, and the CIA don't do democracy. The CIA has overthrown, I think, 83 governments between 1947 and 1997. That's a third of the governments on Earth, and most of them were democracies. Oh, it doesn't do democracy.
It doesn't do democracy. This piece, people ought to, print it out, put it on the wall, learn the history. And it's, I have to say that it's refreshing to see Mainstream, even though many won't agree with me that RFK Jr. is a mainstream U.S. politician, but at least it gives hope to see that he is able to get this across with Tucker, who was thrown out of mainstream media, out of Fox, who now has X-Twitter as his platform. But thanks to Document and to a lot of other independent news channels, at least people around in the world, and many of them have been aware of this, but they've been silenced. And mainstream MSM is silencing these facts, and they're doing the best to erase history. And it won't work, will it?
No, it won't. I mean, I think that's called dumbocracy, not democracy. I mean, the idea that you keep, you want to
Fantastic.
You want to keep the public as dumb as possible so that we have to rely on supposed experts to make decisions for us. And that's just not working. I think the United States is a case study of it not actually working. We think about the expert arguments or arguments from supposed experts about what we should have done going back, for example, to the Iraq War, if not beforehand. So many mistakes, costly mistakes have been made. And the idea that some Poindexter, who happens to be called Victoria Nuland, and actually is the number 2, not confirmed, the acting Deputy Secretary of State. That's the number 2 person. In the American system, the number 2 person typically runs that department of the cabinet. So she's really deciding what projects get pursued and what gets stopped without having been confirmed formally by the Senate, and with a horrible track record going back before Ukraine. This is somebody who has done a worse job in her remit than Joe Biden has done in almost 50 years of screwing things up as a U.S. Senator, then Vice President, and now President of the United States. So a lot of good information, I think, in that RFK perspective.
Speaking about Victoria Nuland, the last of the neocons, and speaking about history, and you mentioned the Iraq War, as I said, we have a crooked map I have a crooked map behind me here. Did Victoria Nuland have anything to say in Hillary's time in the State Department? Oh. I mean, yesterday, why I'm asking is that only yesterday and the day before yesterday, there were heavy fights in Tripoli, Libya.
Right.
At least 27 people killed. That's another of the Dumbocracy moves by Hillary, the U.S., Sarkozy of France, right, and the peace mediator par excellence, former Prime Minister of Norway, former chairman of the Youth Labor League in Norway, etc., etc., Mr. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg of NATO.
Right. I mean,
this was the 3 of them, Sarkozy, Clinton, and Jens, sealed that agreement and bombed and brought Libya to pieces. Libya no more.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm certainly not an expert on international law, but my general understanding of how the UN is supposed to function is that one of the most important principles in international law is the right for individual nations to their self-determination. That's a very important principle. The second you say that America or Norway or China or Russia get to decide who's going to be the leader of Niger or who's going to be the leader of Pakistan, or you pick the country, you've gone into a very dangerous place that is certainly not going to work, as I think history under the UN and prior to that under the League of Nations illustrates very clearly. Individual national structures are being broken down. My own country, my own city, New York City, is a dangerous place. I don't know if it's more or less dangerous than Benghazi right now. Certainly, the wreckage left behind by Barack Obama under Hillary Clinton and then John Kerry, with their various misadventures, the Arab Spring, all those countries that were upset, are any of them better off? And not just to pick on Democrats, George W. Bush getting us into Iraq and then Afghanistan, are those 2 places better off for all the blood and treasure lost? So there's been a lot of, I think, moving in the wrong direction. RFK illustrates that from the left, very, very well. He's actually, I think, a moderate Democrat compared to some of the communists who seem to have a lot of sway inside the Biden administration and stuck inside too many places of our bureaucracies.
You mentioned Niger and the self-determination in the UN Charter. I haven't had time to bring that up and prepare you for it, but since you mentioned Niger, yesterday I got an eye-opener from African friends. We have written on Niger and the coup in Niger at the document in Norwegian. I don't know if we published anything on document.news, but I know that something fishy was going on there. But I got a clip yesterday which told me, and it was seconded by other former colleagues of mine in the UN in Africa, telling me that basically France and the US have screwed Niger and the Nigerians, not to be mistaken by Nigeria, the neighboring country, it's a landlocked country, and they have uranium deposits. And the French companies, the multinationals, have been screwing Niger, the Niger population for generations. In 2014, demonstrations forced the French to agree, the French companies, which I don't remember the names of now, to renegotiate help me here, Charles. I mean,
electricity contract?
How much? How much of the proceeds were going to go to the host country? And it used to be, they had an agreement which was in place that 5.5% of the profits of the uranium being, of course, shipped to Europe and lighting up the Eiffel Tower and whatnot, were to go to the Niger government. After the negotiations, that rate went up to 12.2%. But what did the French multinationals do then? They they split up the companies. They made one production company in Niger, selling the uranium really cheap to France, to the French mother company. So there were not that much. It didn't make any difference. No more money was left with the Niger government or the Niger population because of these procurator tricks by the multinationals. That's why, and the African Union has had sense enough to object to ECOWAS. So that is the coalition of Western supported countries or the West African countries, not to make an invasion because it will be a bloodbath.
Right.
And so don't forget Niger. We have to keep them on our horizon. But it's worth following because the dirty tricks of the French and the Americans are coming to light.
Well, and you really actually have gotten us to the heart of something that RFK and Tucker were talking about. When we think about why it is that dynastic political families would get money in ways that are arguably grossly illegal, the reason is that the big countries like the United States and now Norway and France and the UK hold a lot of influence on the world scene, particularly when it comes to projects that straddle more than one country involving extractive resources. In those projects, big governments can decide whether Burisma gets the contract or some other entity gets the contract to move natural gas or do other things around the world. And in so doing, the people who own these big companies can make massive amounts or lose massive amounts of money depending on what these crooked politicians actually do. And when you look at Niger and the rate that they were getting and contrast that, for example, with the royalties that the private company was going to get in Haiti connected to Hillary Clinton's brother for extracting gold out of a very impoverished country, it's outrageous. The private company was taking a massive slug of that profit, leaving the poor Haitians with nothing. And the people who were around that company had no experience in gold mining, just like Burisma and Hunter Biden. So this is an area that really needs to be policed, but there sadly is no international justice or tax organization robust enough to understand how this corruption works or doesn't work for the people concerned.
I think we have, it's sad. And again, I come back to mass media and to the information age, so-called, that we're living in. You spoke about Haiti. I've been there. I know. I was there after the earthquake in 2010. I was there only for a week or two, but 2 weeks actually. But I could see how the UN was actually making things worse, partially, not entirely. But I could see how everything got off the radar as soon as, half a year after the earthquake, everyone had forgotten about Haiti. Everyone have forgotten about Iraq. Iraq is in shambles. Libya is in shambles. Niger and Nigeria, for that matter, is partially in shambles too, due to, amongst other things, the multinationals, the former colonial powers, have perpetrated, and they know very well because they have their own corrupt politicians. They know how easy it is to corrupt a politician. Yeah. One day we ought to discuss the former coup maker of Ghana, Flight Lieutenant Jesse Rawlins, if I'm not wrong.
Jerry
Rawlins. Jerry Rawlins, yeah. I want to speak more about him now, but the media, MSM, is keeping and doing everything they can to keep people out of the now. Right. They disinform, falsify, and obscure all relevant information. That leads us to today's title. The title of today's program will be coined by you, Charles. Dumbocracy. Dumbocracy. This is what we have, and this is what we will get until people start utilizing the tool that at least internet has given them, and common sense, and break the shackles of the global elites and their minions in the media.
Quickly on that topic, we had the great Jason Goodman and I in Crowdsource the Truth had a chance to interview Simon Ateba, who is the White House correspondent from Africa with a big following in Africa, who has now formally sued the press secretary, I think, and the White House for discriminating against him, which is rich because the press secretary is African American, discriminating against an African on the basis of his race. And if you haven't listened to him, he's a very knowledgeable man who points out that precisely the wrong people to deal with in Africa are the sons and daughters of the people in power, because they're all in on the corrupt game that has been occurring throughout Africa, spurred on by our dynastic elites for now many decades. And he brings a perspective, he says, from people who are not connected to these governments and are closer to the people at large who don't want the foreign aid. They want to create their own Facebooks and their own standout companies on global stage. So there's a big story, I think, set of stories coming out of Africa. We'll probably hear it first from Document, and a long time, if ever, from the mainstream.
You know what? I started off my rant now with the map of northern Norway. And it's not inappropriate. It's actually a fairly valid tangent, because last weekend I went to a fjord southwest of Tromsø called Malangen. And I don't think you've ever heard about Malangen, Charles, and I don't think many people out in the world have heard about Malangen either. It's a beautiful place. I've been there a few times, and I really enjoyed my weekend there. But actually, and I told you this, I went there because I went along Hunter Biden
All right.
and his Secret Service detail and the oligarch, Ukrainian oligarch of Burisma, funding Burisma and funding Hunter Biden and the Biden family. When Biden got $83,000 a month to be on the board, and he knew next to nothing, or nothing, to be frank, about oil, they went on a fishing trip, amongst other places, to Malangen. And our senior editor, Alf Jacobsen, has written a fantastic article about this in Norwegian. I've done help with artificial intelligence. I've done a translation, and I will prepare it and I will publish it on document.news. But right now, my host gave me some good northern Norwegian fish cake, seikake, which made me think of that fishing trip Hunter and family, or Hunter, made for the now acting president of the U.S.
Badly acting.
And badly acting. And again, back to what we were talking about, the media, the Norwegian mass media, mainstream media, knew that Hunter Biden was in Malangen and in Bardufoss. But the big thing for them was that, the son of the vice president of the United States has chosen to go fishing in beautiful northern Norway. They did not ask themselves, why the bloody is he going there? Who is he with? What is the purpose? And nobody has been able to put two and two together before our senior editor did it just last week.
That's good stuff.
Incredible.
I also note that next to your crooked map, you have a doll that looks a bit like Crooked herself up above you. But one thing to talk about on the 2015 issue is that we need to go and reconstruct the timeline of what Joe Biden was doing as point for President Obama on various international matters, and how he then decided to get involved in Ukraine. And after that, after he left as vice president, we need to go through the timeline of understanding what was going on in Ukraine with various investigations, and when was it that Joe Biden decided, first informally and later formally, to run for president. The mainstream journalists have not done that yet. I think when you do, you begin to come pretty well convinced that Joe Biden was put in to the position of the leading candidate to be president, likely to cover up not simply the bad dealings of his family, but likely the bad dealings of others connected to the Burisma project and to projects like Burisma. There's a lot of pulling on threads that's required.
Absolutely. I know you and some of your friends are working on that from the U.S., and I'm so happy that we can have you on our show more or less weekly, and definitely we'll try to make it every week from now. We cannot decide, we won't be able to have a regular day, because Sundays you have your show with Jason, you have your show with Jason on every Wednesday as well. Of course, we'll provide our viewers with the tools. Here we have, Crowdsource the Truth. And that's your interview with Simon Ateba.
Right.
Yeah. But definitely, and I'll ask our viewers to take a look. Our Norwegian viewers can support us on a Norwegian service called Vips. There's also a possibility to support us through PayPal. And of course, if we had, let's say we had what if you had what Hunter Biden had for a month, $83,000 would do wonders for our small stuff and for our meager resources. We could, and we ought to have at least one or two people working in cooperation with you and your friends, Charles, to pull out these loose ends that the MSM won't touch. Let's hope. And I think we've been going on for more or less half an hour. Fortunately, I'm in the position that I can call you, and I'm in mail contact with you, and we exchange a lot of views, and you are an extremely good source of information that I'm so happy to have learned to know and to get aboard the document ship.
Thank you so much.
No, it's a great honor, and people, make sure that you share this story, this interview. No, it's not an interview. This show, hopefully weekly show, with as many people as possible. The truth is out here, but you need to dig to find it.
I agree.
Charles has helped us dig. And in the meanwhile, until you can come up north, I will continue to enjoy the boons of the Arctic Sea.
Have fun.
Have a good day, everyone. See you later. Thank you.
Are you surprised to see an American here in the middle of a Norwegian TV broadcast, somebody who can't really speak more than a few words of Norwegian? You shouldn't be, because I try to go wherever I can find progress. And progress is seen on a daily basis in the many nice reports and newscasts and analytical pieces that come out of Document. I like Document. I like appearing on Document and following the stories. And I would encourage you to tell your friends about it and to join the Document people in their many news shows, which are typically several days, if not weeks ahead of the pack. You'll find progress before many other people will find it if you focus on listening to the good folks and their guests on Document TV, both domestic and international.